Farm Bill, okay?
All right.
30 seconds to start a show. Mike, we will come in on camera 3 after the roll-in. That's it. That's the view.
All right. You want me looking at 3 or at the screen?
At 3. Don't look at the screen.
Okay.
10 seconds to countdown.
The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
When we do have secret prisons, that is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I am reporting live from the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where I am on vacation, and I'm here by the magic of Skype. And my guest today, Mike Lane, is sitting in studio. Thank you, Mike Lane, Republican strategist, for coming here and doing this experiment. Do you hear me okay?
It's coming through loud and clear, Mark. I think we have technology for now.
That's good. That's good. If I go down, you're going to get only the Republicans. So hopefully I'll stay on with you here. All right. There's a lot to talk about, Mike. Goings on in Congress. Something really strange happened. A farm bill actually lost in Congress. I want to talk about that and also move on to what that means for the immigration bill, which appears to, I think, be in trouble. But I want to hear from you on that. Then we'll move on to foreign policy. President Obama is abroad. I want to know what he's accomplishing there and also talk about changes in Syria, because it appears that Obama is finally gingerly, tenderly supporting some action there. Then we've got all kinds of stories just with America. Paula Deen is in trouble because of some of her comments. I want to know what you feel about that, Mike. The military is in trouble with its issues of sexual harassment and really anything else that our callers want to bring up. If you want to call in, the number is 571-749-1166. So I want to start with the Farm Bill, Mike, because the Farm Bill is something that I think you and I can both agree was a bad bill. I don't know about that. I'll get to you in a second. But it's rare for a farm bill to be denied. Now, of course, Farm Bill is code word for massive farm subsidies, generally to very rich farmers. Democrats do get something out of it. They usually get some food stamp aid out of it, which I support. But in the end of the run, I'm usually against it because this is massive amounts of money that we don't have to people who don't need them. And what happened here was extraordinary. The Republicans took it there. The leadership wanted it to pass, and they got 170 Republicans, but they didn't get all of them. They got about 2/3 of them. They only didn't get the 30 or 40 Democrats they needed. And so the whole thing fell through. So I want to talk with you about the substance, Mike, and then go on and talk about the politics. Let's start with the substance. What's your view on the Farm Bill?
Mark, you and I concur. It's not something I could have supported. Why are we involved in massive farm subsidies on an annual basis, year after year after year? It's not necessary, in my view. We have price supports in there that actually make things more expensive for consumers rather than less expensive. I think, I'm happy that the bill took a dive.
I'm happy the bill failed as well. Of course, Farm Bill came out of the Great Depression at a time when farming was a large part of the American economy. It's a much smaller part of the American economy now. And basically, it just kept going on and on. We can argue over whether it was necessary in the Great Depression. I probably would have been a supporter of it then. But clearly, this is a program that has long past served its purpose. The vast majority of Americans aren't farmers. And the people who are tend to be massive agribusinesses that don't need the crop insurance support and all those things. So I think it was 10 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, the Democrats and Republicans came together and said, we're finally getting rid of farm subsidies, but we can't get rid of it all at once because that'll be too hard on farmers. So we're going to pay direct payments. Doesn't matter whether you farm or not. We're going to slowly decrease those over time. Now here's the deadline, and they were trying to extend them again. I'm glad it died.
Mark, anytime the government gets involved in distorting the market, as they do in the agricultural atmosphere, then when you want to do something else with it, of course, you need to step out slowly, which was the plan, to step out slowly because you are, again, making the market impacted by government actions. I think it's time really to just get out of the market. It just, it's a program that has long-lived its usefulness, outlived its usefulness, and I think it's time to let the market take over.
Right. Remember, we are the breadbasket to the world. We export food, and the idea that we are internally protecting our farmers just encourages every other country, and most of them do. In France and Japan, Europe, they protect their farmers. Simply, this is an industry that's doing fine. We are the breadbasket of the world. Let's let the markets take over. If I felt that workers were being harmed by this, I certainly would be against it, but I don't really see any harm in it. We both think it should go. So that's good. We agree on that. But let me move on to the politics of the question, which in some ways are more interesting than the actual question itself. Here you have a Republican leadership in Speaker Boehner in the House that is largely requiring a few Democratic votes to get its work done. Now, this is new for me. When I worked in Congress, Tom DeLay was the majority leader. Speaker Denny Hastert was the speaker, but everyone would tell you Tom DeLay was in charge. He may have been number 2 on the letterhead. But Tom DeLay was an incredible whip, and he could get vast majorities of Republicans to vote how he wanted. Actually, even when there were few Republicans, they're in the House now. I remember one time when he was trying to get a Republican to vote his way on, I think it was textile subsidies, and he was voting against Congressman Robin Hayes of North Carolina. May well represent where I am now. I'm not sure about that. But the congressman was crying, literally tears on his eyes, because he was going to vote against his constituents because Tom DeLay insisted that happen. That kind of discipline is gone now in the Republican Party. It sounds to me like you got maybe even a third of Republicans that won't follow the whip chain, that won't do what the speaker wants them to do. I want to know if you agree with my analysis, and then I want to know if you think it's a good thing or not.
Well, the Tom DeLay was known as the Hammer, and he was an incredible whip. He could really put the votes together, and it was hell to pay if you crossed him. So the caucus was a little bit more cohesive and uniform under Tom DeLay than it is in the current situation with Kevin McCarthy as the whip and Eric Cantor as the leader, and Speaker Boehner, of course, representing the whole House. I think there's a lot of diversity in the Republican conference. I think that you range anywhere from the moderates to the very conservative and every stripe in between, and getting the moderates and the very conservatives on the same page is a difficult thing. And the speaker had apparently, at least he said, he struck a deal with Leader Pelosi to provide 40 Democratic votes. And he flat out came out and used the word reneged and said that Speaker Pelosi reneged on providing the 40 Democratic votes to get it through. They didn't really have a relationship to start with, so it wasn't damaged any further as a result of that.
The math was as follows. Republicans were supposed to bring 180 votes to the table. The Democrats were supposed to bring 40 votes to the table. In order to get the 180 votes, they made the bill more and more conservative. They cut things like food stamp aid. And finally, the Democrats couldn't get their 40 votes to the table. And by the way, neither did the Republicans. They didn't get 180 either. They got 171. So both sides, as you will, didn't come there. Again, you and I like that because we both hated the bill. But in the general politics of it, I guess I want to know from you as a Republican, do you think this is good to live in an era of more diverse Republican votes, people voting their conscience, people voting their district? Or do you think it's a bad thing and times were better in the Tom DeLay era of enforced loyalty to whatever the Republican leadership wanted?
Mark, that's the way it was when I first came to Washington back in the 70s and started observing and participating in this process. Where you did have people more representing their district and you did not have cohesive caucuses. It's what I learned on. I'm not uncomfortable with that. I think there's time when the caucus does need to stick together. In this particular case, I don't think this particular farm vote creates any lasting damage to the Republican caucus, conference, in the House. What they're going to do is simply take another $20 billion or so out of the food stamp program, bring it back, and that will be enough to get the farm bill through with all Republican votes. I actually think that the Democrats may have missed an opportunity to look at this strategically and saved an extra $20 billion for the food stamp program that they like.
So you're saying they're going to cut food stamps even more?
I think they'll take another $20 billion out of it.
That will get enough Republicans to vote that they'll pass the bill without any Democratic votes.
I believe that's probably that's the most likely scenario in my estimation at this point. Yes.
But if that's true, what you're saying is, in effect, there's 218 Republicans, maybe a few less, given a few Democrats, but let's say 210 Republicans, the vast majority of the caucus, that are willing to flat out support corporate welfare, support corporate subsidies.
No.
What happened to the Ron Pauls and the libertarians who are against needless government spending?
Well, Mark, there are some additional reductions to the generic price support program and the subsidies for farmers. The problem with the overall spending is that they added a bunch of new programs which exceeded the standard program of the subsidies and came up with a bigger number. It's crazy. I think one of the things that the Republicans ought to adopt in a time of arguing over the budget is no new programs. We can argue about what the proper level is for existing programs, but they ought to adopt a no new programs, and there was a plethora of new programs in the Farm Bill. It was stupid.
But here's my question. The Republicans go on air and they act like they're the party that's against big spending. And there are a few libertarians, Ron Paul and Rand Paul are probably the clearest ones that come to mind, that really are against almost any government spending, particularly, again, on corporate welfare, on rich farmers that don't need it. That's sort of a liberal conservative issue. But the true conservative, or at least the true libertarian, says no spending for anything except defense and some really, basic things. It sounds to me like the true libertarian caucus, what you might call the Ron Paul caucus in your party, really is very small. I mean, 10, 20 Republicans at most. You've got 218 without them, is I guess what I think you're saying.
It's smaller than that. The true libertarian, Ron Paul lost a lot of votes, 434 to 1. He was a guy who was just a very interesting character. He had a good conscience. He had a lot of good things to say. He forced people to think about it and probably improved the process. But nobody would ever accuse Ron Paul of being influential or having legions of followers in the Congress. Now, he had legions of followers in the American public, but the Libertarian caucus is quite small. I think that one of the things that observers fail to realize is that there is a difference between the Ron Paul people and the Tea Party people. They are not one and the same, even though they have some issues that are the same.
That's true. I guess the point, though, is that when Republicans say that they're opposed to government spending, the answer is the vast majority of them support government spending as long as it's the things they want spending on. They're not opposed to all government spending. They're opposed to liberal government spending, but they're just fine with conservative government spending.
Mark, purity it leads to gridlock. And, you keep telling me that you want to get less gridlock going here. I actually don't think gridlock's a bad thing when you're stopping bad things from happening. But if I'm not one of those people, nor do I recommend there be anybody who falls on their sword and dies for 100% purity rather than accept the 99 to 1 or whatever hurdle you want to make it.
Well, I agree with you. Actually, I'm glad that there is some people willing to vote. I just don't want people to say anymore that Republicans are against government spending, because the vast, vast majority of them are not. Folks, if you want to call in, it's 571-749-1166. You can join in this discussion. We'll be right back right after this.
She's had more than a dozen fractures. And in the next few years, she faces 2 major surgeries to strengthen her fragile bones. She's only 10 years old. Most people don't worry about fragile bones until late in life. For those with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bones are a concern throughout their lifetime. Find out how you can strengthen this child's future.
Diabetes is a killer. After I was diagnosed, I didn't feel sick, so I didn't listen to my doctor. Then it struck. I had a heart attack, then a stroke, and I was only 49.
Most people with diabetes also have high blood pressure and cholesterol, which can cause severe heart damage. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke.
Don't let diabetes destroy your life.
Call for your free diabetes survival guide. Choose to live.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
All right, good evening, folks. As you can see, we're having some technical difficulties here getting the audio feed from Mark, who's coming to us remote tonight from Southern Shores, North Carolina, on the Outer Banks. Mark actually mentioned that there may be a particular congressman that represents where he is down there. He got that one wrong. It's Walter Jones, who represents that particular district in North Carolina. And Mr. Jones actually lives in my high-rise condo building, so that's how I know him and where he's from. We have some breaking news tonight. Recently, about maybe 45 minutes ago, less than an hour ago, the Senate approved by a vote of 67 to 27 the Corker-Hoeven Amendment, which was the amendment that allegedly enhances border security as part of the overall wide-sweeping Immigration Reform Act put forward by the Gang of Eight. There were 14 Republicans, and I believe 100% of the Democratic caucus supported that amendment. So we have now on the floor a continued consideration of the immigration reform, and it looks like from this vote that the bill is going to pass comfortably, although it will probably pass about, it'll be, at this point, it looks to be 3 votes short of the 70 votes that the Gang of Eight was guaranteeing we were going to have, or at least setting that out as the must-have goal. Once the Senate finishes consideration, it will go to the House. The House of Representatives will probably take a different approach than the Senate bill. They will not consider the Senate bill as a whole. They will break it up into 4 or 5 pieces and report out each particular piece of immigration reform, starting with border security. Then both houses should take their respective legislation to a conference committee. And of course, it's always key as to who's on the conference committee as to what the final bill will look like as it comes back to each house for passage. One of the things that I'm sure Mark would ask me, as we're still working with the technical difficulty here, trying to figure out how to bring his audio back in, I can, as my eyes dart to the right at the monitor, I know we still have the video of Mark, but we are trying to bring his audio back in.
I'm trying to come in by telephone.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
I believe I can hear you, Mark. Yes, you are audible in the studio.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do this by telephone, even though I hear my echo of my own voice, and we'll try to do that way. So let me start by asking you, Mike, about the immigration bill. I thank you for spreading that news and letting us know about that. The argument was made that the problems with the Farm Bill are going to kill the immigration bill. Now, apparently that didn't happen in the Senate, but could it destroy prospects for the immigration bill in the House?
Mark, I think it's real clear that what the Farm Bill signaled is that the Republican conference is not going to provide en masse the votes to get the Senate Gang of Eight bill through the House. When we were having technical difficulties, I offered my opinion, which I'll repeat here, that the House Judiciary Committee will start taking up immigration reform legislation very, very shortly. The chairman of that committee is from right here in Virginia, Bob Goodlatte, comes from Roanoke, and he has signaled that they will pass 4, maybe 5 pieces of legislation that address various aspects of immigration reform, starting with border security, and they feel very comfortable taking their 5 pieces of legislation to a House-Senate conference committee to work out the details at such time as they have something to bring there.
Will the House pass anything that actually provides for a chance for undocumented immigrants in the United States to obtain citizenship, to get a green card, to do, in essence, what the Senate bill is doing?
Well, that's 2 things. Number one, you said citizenship, and the other one was green card. Let's take the second one first, because that's the order in which it goes. The Senate bill provides that anyone who is here illegally now within a couple months would be eligible for green card status, and they would have legal status here in the United States. But then there would be any number of hoops that they would work through, and it looks like it would probably be in the area of 10 to 15 or 10 to 13 years before they were eligible for citizenship. I think that it is unlikely that the House is going to pass something like that out of the House on their own, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility at all that that will be part of a final House-Senate conference committee, assuming the House is satisfied with the enhanced border security measures that they're likely to put in their border security part that are absent from the Senate bill.
So you're predicting, in fact, that the House would not necessarily do anything with regard to citizenship, but might agree to something out of a conference committee. Why can't the Republicans in the House come up with some kind of comprehensive solution? They could combine, like the Senate has, the enhanced border security with whatever they want to provide for undocumented immigrants. They just don't have the votes to pass anything that actually helps the people here, do they?
I don't think they have the votes. Help is a relative term, Mark. What is help? We have the accepted number, I think now, is 11 million illegal aliens here in the country against the law. Helping them means what? I'm not sure I know what you mean by that, but I'm not sure that we would have a consensus as to how to approach that. I think that Republicans for the past 30 years have always been about border security first. And after we get the border security, we will be glad to sit down and talk about everything else with everything on the table after we achieve the border security. Democrats.
Yeah, that's the trick, right? You get us to agree to border
I don't
security,
think so,
and then
no.
you don't have to do anything with regard to actually helping the people that are here, with regard to not letting employers mistreat the people here, which of course undercuts American jobs when they pay them less and then treat them worse off. I mean, it's kind of like saying in any deal, all right, you pay me the money, and then I'll see what I can do for you. Most people wouldn't accept that kind of deal.
I actually don't think that's the case, Mark. I mean, the honest to goodness truth is neither side trusts each other.
That's true.
I can tell you that I believe Republicans will sit down and in good faith address all the rest of the issues after they get border security. You don't believe me and you don't believe the Republicans. You tell me that you want border security and at the same time will do all these other things, and I don't believe you and I don't believe the Democrats. There's just a complete lack of trust here.
We know that President Obama has done far more with border security than the prior president, President George W. Bush, ever did. Far more people have been, stopped from crossing the border. Far more people have been deported, which, frankly, is not something that comes out very often because Latino groups don't like that President Obama is much stronger with regard to border security than really any prior president of the United States. So I know you folks want more, but do you concede, in fact, that President Obama has done more than anyone else has before him?
Certainly deportations are up. I will grant you that. I don't know that we're stopping all that many more people at the border. I know there are fewer people coming in, but that's more a function of the dreadful Obama economy, and there's no jobs here for people to sneak into the country and take anyway.
Unemployment's down, Mike.
Say that again, Mark?
We can't really interrupt each other the way we can on there. Go ahead.
Again, I think Republicans would be very open-minded and very compassionate after we achieve border security. I can tell you that the House Republican Conference does not look at the amendment that passed tonight as being a reasonable border security amendment. Notwithstanding the fact that it was a Republican amendment from Corker and Hoeven. They still, there's things in there like you must have the fence. We have to double the size of the fence before we can move forward, except when you read the fine print, Secretary Napolitano has the right to waive that absolute requirement for the border fence. So in essence, there is, it's not really a good border security amendment. I think the key to this whole thing, the key to the whole thing is going to be what we get out of the conference committee.
There's 2,000 miles of border between the United States and Mexico. Some of it is very easy to put up a fence. Some of it is, very tall mountains and very forbidden desert. Probably you could post something along the Rio Grande with not too much trouble. But this idea that, do you really feel that every inch between the United States and Mexico has to have a fence?
No, I'm not like that. And the Corker Amendment didn't call for that. There's about 350 miles of fencing now. And the Corker Amendment only called for doubling it to 700 miles. There are areas where fencing makes sense, where it works, where you can, actually install it at a reasonable price. And there are areas where it is so difficult to cross the border and actually make your way to any place through the desert and to make your place to anywhere in civilization that it really is not a cost-effective method of providing security.
Since we agree on that, since we agree that there are places where the fence is effective and cost effective, and there are places where it's not unnecessary and also cost prohibitive, why shouldn't the Department of Homeland Security head, namely Janet Napolitano, or under the next president, if it's Republican president, whoever he or she appoints, why shouldn't this be something that is left up to discretion of the cabinet member, Homeland Security chair?
Well, Mark, if politics wasn't at play and we had a perfect world where the policy head of the Homeland Security, Secretary, whomever, I will not blame Napolitano in this particular scenario, if we had a situation where they would look at it and make make decisions in the best interest of the country, then I think, we'd be fine. But now bringing the partisan, I don't believe Secretary Napolitano acts in the best interest of the country. I think she acts in the best interest of the Democratic Party. I think she acts in the best interest of the constituents of the Democratic Party. And she's already on record in front of Congress about 2 months ago as saying the border is already secure. We don't need to do anything else. Well, the legislation...
Janet Napolitano is the former governor of Arizona.
Right.
If there's any state that should care about the border, it's the state of Arizona, which, as you know, is generally a red state, not even a blue state. She's a Democrat, but she was elected governor of Arizona. It seems to me that perhaps no one in the country is more fit to talk about border security issues than the former governor of Arizona.
Mark, she left Arizona a long time ago. She's now a partisan Democrat. She does things to help the Democratic Party. She does not act in the best interests of the United States and Homeland Security. That's just, that's a function of the partisan hack that she is, and I don't trust her. And I'm not willing to vest in her the authority to use whatever partisan judgment she might want to overlay on the whole thing and just say, no, we're not going to do this.
Yeah, and now you have Congress micromanaging every inch of fence wall. Let me ask you one last question before we go, though.
It's not a good solution, but,
Let me ask you one question before we go. We talked about the Farm Bill. A lot of analysts believe that because the Farm Bill failed, there's even less trust in Congress, and that the failure of the Farm Bill is likely to lead to the failure of the immigration bill. Do you agree?
No, I think they're unrelated. I think the immigration bill is going to be different in the House from the Senate, regardless of what happened to the Farm Bill.
All right, fair enough. We're going to move on and talk about foreign policy when we come back. If you want to dial in, 571-749-1166.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self, and now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip@aol.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read. and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine reporting live from the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where I'm on vacation. It's beautiful out here. You really should check it out if you've never been there. I actually haven't been here since I was 5 years old, so I'm enjoying it, and I'm going to have a chance to go check out Kitty Hawk, where the Wright brothers began their maiden flight. But there's, of course, a lot still going on in Washington, where Mike Lane is holding down the fort. Mike Lane is my Republican friend.
Yeah, I think
he
we're
is
friends.
the head president of Intelligence Strategies. I guess I have more than one Republican friend, maybe not too many. But he's the president of Intelligence Strategies. He's a Republican strategist. Of course, I am a Democrat ex-congressional attorney, so we always have lots to talk about and often disagree about. Mike, President Obama is abroad right now. He is in Africa. He finished a European trip. He's now in Africa. I think it's a good idea when presidents visit foreign countries. I think they go out and they conduct foreign policy. Every president has done it in recent times. And I don't think President Obama has been out of town more often than other presidents like George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan or any of the others. Why are Republicans complaining now if it's not just partisan hackery?
About
his trips.
Well, I don't think you saw any complaints about the G8 last week. That was that was something that looked like it was actually a real foreign policy trip. This current trip, I actually didn't know he was already out of town. I didn't think he was leaving until tomorrow. But this
you may be right. I'm sorry.
But this current $100 million vacation he's taking to Africa, it just doesn't seem to have any point to it. There's certainly no bang for the buck. There's lots of vacation time built into the whole thing. My personal view is, in a time of budget cuts and a time when federal employees are being furloughed, that maybe that $100 million could be better spent from an optics point of view. His ratings are already down. I don't think this is going to hurt him that much more, but it certainly is not going to help.
Now, Mike, this kind of stuff I would expect to hear from Sarah Palin, perhaps from Sean Hannity, from Rush Limbaugh. I gotta say, I thought you were better than this. The vast majority of the $100 million, as I'm sure you know, is for security. Obviously, we want the president to be secure. No one is saying it's except Sean Hannity's and Sarah Palin's of the world. It's a $100 million vacation. It's not like the president gets $100 million and goes on shopping sprees throughout Africa. This is the amount that's necessary for his security. I'm sure you don't think that any less should be spent on the president's security. What you're really saying, I think, is that you don't think Africa is important enough for a United States president to visit.
I don't think the particular countries he's visiting and the itinerary is important enough for $100 million. And yes, I will stipulate that it's mostly security. It's also the president's health. They have to bring an entire modern hospital ship and float it for a week off the coast of Africa in case any medical needs, that the president has any need for medical attention, stuff like that. They'll put him in a helicopter and whisk him off to the United States hospital ship that is sitting there off the coast.
That's true if he visited Afghanistan or Iraq or any third world country.
I don't begrudge the fact that if you're going to make the trip, those are absolutely legitimate expenditures. They are legitimate expenditures. What's not legitimate is the trip in the first place, where he's not going anywhere or doing anything important.
We haven't had many presidents visit Africa, okay? This is not very common. Africa is the poorest region of the world, and it's frankly a region that needs help. It needs worldwide help. And, there's a lot of bad stuff that happens there because they don't have the resources that other nations do. We had genocide in Sudan. We've got, I forgot his name, in the Congo, that horrible person that's... you probably remember Joseph. His name escapes me, but you know what I'm talking about. The guy who's yes, that's him. Awful person. He's killing parents and putting their children in the army. There's a lot of brutality in Africa. There's also a lot of resources in Africa. If you don't care about the horrible brutality, you might care about gold or silver or diamonds or all kinds of things that are useful for corporate use. Here's what I don't understand. Africa has as much value, it seems to me, as Asia, Europe, South America. It's certainly, and it puts a vast continent, And we've had presidents ignore Africa for years. When George W. Bush decided to help Africa with its AIDS problem, Democrats and Republicans applauded him for that. Why suddenly should this president not notice Africa?
Mark, perhaps the $100 million that's being spent on this vacation would be better put into foreign aid for the people of Africa.
You call it a vacation, but you know that's not true. This is a working, I mean, it's only a vacation in the sense that any place the president goes is a vacation. This is reaching out to African nations, both for political reasons and military reasons, but also for, aid for resources and so forth. I mean, why do you and Republicans
his itinerary just doesn't rise to the level of presidential trip making. It's just, if he was going to go to Africa, the first place he ought to go is Egypt and sit down with Morsi and, find out, why this guy is getting off the reservation. There are other places in Africa that are more important. We have probably a funeral coming up in just a few days for Nelson Mandela in South Africa. These are things that would warrant presidential attention. His agenda that he has now just doesn't rise to the level of presidential attention.
Well, if Nelson Mandela dies, then certainly, I'm sure Vice President Biden will be on a plane there. In terms of policy, though, there's a big difference, as I'm sure you know, Mike, between Black Africa and the Arab world. I mean, Egypt is a Middle Eastern country. It is on the continent of Africa, just as Libya and Algeria are. But their connections are much more to Saudi Arabia, to the Middle East, than they are to what is south of the Sahara Desert. What south of the Sahara Desert is the poorest region on Earth. It's also a region filled with a lot of conflict and a lot of natural resources. And I just wonder if the Republicans would begrudge the president this much if he were visiting Asia or Latin America, for example.
It depends on what countries he's visiting. If he's visiting nowhere, nothing, then I think he'd be. Look, it's more the political optics of it. He's going to do it.
I think that's what it is too.
But there are, as a result of the sequester, there are FBI agents and teachers who are being furloughed and other government workers who are being furloughed. That $100 million could be put to better use than what he's putting it. That's my point.
Your party, which just wanted 170 of them to pass this farm bill to give all this money to farmers who don't need it. Let me say this about the furloughs, just to be very clear. Democrats were opposed to that. Republicans supported that. So to use something that your party supported to complain about the president conducting really standard, normal foreign policy,
Mark,
I just think that's something for Sean Hannity and Sarah Palin. I thought that was beyond you, Mike.
First of all, furloughs were the president's idea, not Republicans' idea. And secondly, the Republicans were the one who passed legislation giving the authority to each department to move the money around so that they wouldn't have to furlough people. And the president said, hell no, absolutely not. So, come on.
It would have required furloughs anyway. It's just a question of sort of who gets it or who doesn't get it. I know the Republican idea, for example, it was to stop furloughing air traffic controllers. The idea was, okay, we won't improve airports for several years. Well, airports, they have deteriorating runways, just like bridges fall apart. Airport runways and airports need improvement. This idea that you're going to cut our infrastructure to save a few bucks so that you get a lot more corporate welfare out, Mark, that's a Republican idea. Sorry, Mike.
Again, the whole sequester idea was 100% Barack Obama's idea. We don't need to.
But I want to move on with foreign policy, though, because you do point out the importance of Egypt and the Middle East. And the most important problem in the Middle East right now, as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the world is concerned, is a growing civil war, I would say, between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims. It began out of the revolution in Syria. I have long argued, as you know, Mike, for more than a year now, that we needed to do a no-fly zone to help the rebels in Syria. I'm afraid the conflict is morphing into what I feared and becoming a general Middle Eastern war. You've got Iran involved, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Egyptians, frankly, on the side of Sunni Muslims. You've got Iran and Hezbollah and Russia on the side of the Shia Muslims, and it's growing. Lebanon's already part of the war. It's just as much part of the war as Syria almost right now. Jordan and Turkey are getting involved, and of course, as I said, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. President Obama, to his credit, to his little credit, because I've been hard on him on this, has finally said that he's going to do something. He's finally admitted that the Syrian government crossed its red lines with chemical weapons, and we are going to help supply the rebels with arms. Now, while I do think this is too little, and it is late, I still hope it is not too little, too late. One of the things I read in the Washington Post recently is because the United States at least has committed to helping the rebels, that other countries have seen the green light open to give them a lot more arms and so forth than we're giving them. Again, it's late, and I've been critical, but it's better than nothing, and I'll give him, let's say, 1 cheer out of 3 for at least doing something. But I fear that we're not doing enough still, and it's going to morph into a really very large Sunni Shia Muslim conflict, which could engulf 1 billion people and be horrific.
Mark, you and I have been on the same page on this for about 2 years since the Syrian civil war started. We've been pretty much in agreement in terms of what path the president should have taken. And as things unfolded, of course, both to our mutual horror, the slaughter of close to 100,000 people and rising in Syria took place. Now, I don't know that I can say I'm still on the same page with you. Things have gotten so bad over there. It's been delayed for so long. You say, well, the president finally took the right steps. I'm not convinced that these are the right steps under the circumstances. They absolutely would have been the right steps a year ago. They would have definitely been the right steps 2 years ago. But now things have become so entangled, and there are so many al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups mixed and mingled with the genuine resistance fighters, freedom fighters in Syria. You've got Hezbollah all in, backing Syria. It becomes now almost a no-win situation. I don't know that I can be as enthusiastic about this as you are after having been with you on this for 2 years.
Well, I gave him 1 cheer out of 3, which is not enthusiasm. I'm glad. I think it's better than nothing. I guess I would say to you, Mike, is while I completely agree with you, there is no easy answer and that we should have gotten involved 2 years ago, we got to deal with what we have right now. And the question is, what other choice do we have? To me, doing nothing is a choice. And doing nothing leads to horrific deaths and, more importantly, leads to this massive Sunni Shia conflict that, as far as I'm concerned, is, I don't want to exaggerate too much, but is the closest to Cold War or World War III that we've seen in the Cold War. I mean, the Soviet Union, Russia, is on the other side. And we've got billions of people who are upset and are called up. This is a catastrophe. And I would argue that if we did not get involved, even now, even late, it would be an even worse catastrophe. That's a choice as well.
2 things, Mark. Number one, I agree with your assessment. This has the potential to turn into a theater-wide conflict of Sunni versus Shia, and that would be awful. That would be just horrific. The second thing, in support of what you are saying and in support of the president's move, is the one thing we cannot do is we cannot let Hezbollah become emboldened as a result of their assistance to Syria and let them get not only the experience but get the credit for helping Syria. That would be horrible because the whole Israel...
Right, absolutely. Hezbollah and Iran and Russia, all these bad people. All right, when we come up, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court. We'll be right back after this.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ringtown fight. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals and the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine reporting live from the Outer Banks of North Carolina. This is done through the magic of Skype and through the very hard work of a number of people working behind the scenes, people like Jim Southworth and Jim Girardi, and I assume Roger is there, though I didn't see him, and all the other people who were there working behind the scenes. Raphael, if you're there as well. I don't know who's there because I'm here in North Carolina, but I know how hard they worked to get this to work, and you could see even we had a little bit of a technical problem, but they worked well as well. Anyway, I am Mark Levine. My guest is sitting in studio. He has to wear the jacket and tie. He's in Washington, D.C. while I'm on vacation. Mike Lane, I always appreciate having you on the show. I want to conclude by talking a little bit about the United States Supreme Court and then about the troubles of Paula Deen and maybe even a couple other things if there's time. So let's start with the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is ending its session. The last week in June is always the most interesting week for court watchers because that's when they come down with their most interesting opinions. In fact, it's expected that in a couple days they're going to come down with a very big decision on same-sex marriage in California and on the Defense of Marriage Act. We'll wait to see what they decide there. I want to talk about the decision they made just today on affirmative action. It seems to me that in a very carefully worded decision, but a 7-1 opinion, which is actually more agreement than we usually have on the United States Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court is saying, be careful, give it strict scrutiny, but it's not time to end affirmative action just yet. There are times when diversity is important, and when it comes to college admissions, that's when diversity is perhaps most important. The Texas system, which allows the top 10% of students in public schools across Texas and thus allows for segregated neighborhoods and Latinos and blacks to be represented in Texas colleges, is working. They have to give it strict scrutiny. They have to look at it again. But this Supreme Court is not ready to end affirmative action just yet. I applaud the decision.
Mark, it was a non-decision. I don't think there's anything to applaud or not to applaud. What they did was they took the decision from the Fifth Circuit and looked at it and said, no, you've analyzed this all wrong and used all the wrong criteria. Take it back and do this right. They weren't going to do the Fifth Circuit's job for them. They did not say that affirmative action had outlived its usefulness, and they did not say that the scheme developed by the University of Texas to diversify their student body was legal and would pass legal or judicial muster. What they said was, take it back and do this right, please. You really screwed up. You're right. It was a 7-1 decision. The odd justice out, I believe, was Justice Sotomayor or Justice Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg was the odd justice out. Interestingly, the two concurring opinions with the majority, both Thomas and Scalia, indicated it was time to revisit the decisions that allowed for consideration of race in college admissions. But since the petitioner had not asked them to do so, they were not going to do it at this time.
I see that as a positive thing. To me, the fact that not just Robertson Kennedy, but even Alito, who usually doesn't support things like affirmative action, that they weren't willing to end it just yet. Liberals are very concerned. This was going to be the case that was going to end affirmative action once and for all. It hasn't done that, and I think that's good. I think that we've still got a lot of not only race issues in America, but need for diversity. We need to have in our college system, we learn more from each other often than our professors, and we can't learn from each other if our college system reflects only a certain strata of the American population. So I realize it was mostly a non-decision, but it's a non-decision that when you got 5-4 conservatives on the Supreme Court, we liberals were glad to see.
Well, I'm looking forward to what the Fifth Circuit does when they reconsider the case under the doctrine of strict scrutiny and see whether or not they come up with a different. For our viewers who don't know what it is, essentially what this means is they gave the benefit of the doubt in the incorrect methodology they gave the benefit of the doubt to the University of Texas, and they required the petitioner, Fisher, to prove her case. And under strict scrutiny, it's the opposite. The petitioner gets the benefit of the doubt, and the government, University of Texas, has to prove that their program actually meets all the legal guidelines.
And I think it does, but we'll find out when things comes back. Let me move on to another issue of race, and a very interesting one, one that a lot of people were talking about, a lot of dinner table discussion. Maybe that's appropriate given her role in food. But I want to talk about Paula Deen. I've never talked about Paula Deen on the air before, but I found her deposition fascinating, and not just for what it said about her. Actually, that was a very small part of it. But for what it says about us. Now, I'm a kid of the South. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and I read that deposition carefully. She may have other issues that I don't know about. Her brother, it seems to be kind of a difficult person. I'm not standing up for him. But just from the deposition, I read every page of it, I thought this was taken a bit too far. So here's what she says in the deposition. She says that she used the N-word when discussing what other people said to her, repeating phrases people said to her. She once used it with her husband, apparently, when a black man held her up at gunpoint. It's not a word I would have used, but I think we can give her a little bit of leeway for that. At the end of the day, I'm not justifying it, but I do think that maybe it's gone a little bit too far. What she said was, people use that word, and the answer is look, it's very different to discuss the word and use the word to discuss the word, as I've done, I admit that, and very different from calling an individual that word and using it in a derogatory fashion, which I think is completely improper. And it doesn't sound like, apart from the guy that held her up at gunpoint, that she ever did. So there is an issue which I want to talk about with regard to black waiters. I'll get to that in a minute. But just on her use of the N-word and the deposition, I happen to think it's gone a bit too far. I don't know. What do you think?
Mark, very, very few people could take a deposition under oath and state for a fact that they had never used it. So it's universal. At some point in your life, for whatever reason, most people wind up using the word, perhaps
just
even
to
more than
discuss it,
once.
perhaps.
Right.
I mean, I remember, there's a big difference between discussing a word, and even if you think the word is a horrible word, which I do, and saying why you don't think people should use it. But also we have rap music where people are quoting lyrics from it. Look, I hate the word. I don't think anyone should ever be, as I said to a friend of mine when I discussed this, there's lots of reasons to dislike people. And if you think someone is a jerk for some reason and you want to say they're a bad person, say they're a bad person, say they're a jerk, and they're stronger words than I would use on the air to call them a jerk. But they're a jerk because they're a jerk. They're not a jerk because of their race or religion or national origin or anything like that. And it doesn't appear that she at least admitted under oath to any of that. She simply said that she used the word, which again, you could read Mark Twain out loud and use the word when you read Huckleberry Finn.
If you're reading Huckleberry
that
Finn,
in and of itself is not enough.
I agree with you. In many aspects of life, we have political correctness gone wild, and we wind up overreacting to things that we should not react to. I remember only about 8 or 10 years ago, when Senator Robert Byrd, the grand old man of the Senate, former Democratic leader, used that word on camera in a press conference, and
talking about white people, weirdly
right,
enough.
Right.
But of course, Byrd has a whole other issues because he's an ex-member of the Ku Klux Klan, so there's reasons to be worried about him.
But we do have political correctness gone wild. But ultimately, look, this comes down to, in my mind, this is between Paula Deen and the Food Network. And the Food Network decided that she was going to become a liability in excess of what they wanted to invest to rehabilitate her, if they were so inclined to do, which they're not. I think I don't watch the Food Network a lot. I actually don't watch Paula Deen a lot. I understand she has maybe 1 million viewers. She's not as important as even our discussion is giving her credit for being. But the key to the whole thing, to me, is this is between the Food Network and Paula Deen. They are going to find out, I think, that they need her more than she needs them. She's going to go out independently, establish her own brand, and she's going to make more money and maintain her audience, and the Food Network is going to have a slot to fill.
I don't know that that's true. I actually think this may damage her permanently, and I'm sorry about that, and not just because I happen to like butter in my food. No, I mean, to me, it is a shame because maybe because I grew up in the South and because I heard that word used in awful ways, in derogatory ways, in explicitly racist ways. And in fact, I can tell you that I would tell people off when they did that. There's a woman, in fact, who used to use that word so frequently that I told her I would walk away every time I heard her say it, and I did. And that was just sort of my way of dealing with it. So the point is not that racism is over or that these things don't go on. And let me be very clear. There are some allegations, and I don't know if they're true or not. I have no idea. But there are allegations that Paula Deen actively did not hire or recruit or promote black employees as much as white employees, that she helped the light-skinned ones and in favor of the dark-skinned ones. If any of that is true, then obviously the Food Network needs to get rid of her and America needs to condemn her. But I do think that has to be proven, and at least the people who say it have to be clear about that. She did trot out one employee, a very dark African-American man who apparently she helped very much in her business. So again, I don't know whether the allegations are true. To me, what it was more interesting than the specifics of Paula Deen is what it says about us, what it says about Americans, what it says about the South and where we've come and where we have yet to go. I would hope that people could make a distinction between discussing racism and even discussing a horrific word and using that word negatively against someone. To me, those are very important distinctions.
Mark, again, she had something of a cult thing going on. I am a fan of butter in my food as well. I'm not a fan of Paula Deen's. I've really not paid that much attention to her. She has 1 million viewers. There's 350 people in America. If you're going to watch the Food Network, I recommend, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. Those are much better than Paula Deen.
Yeah, I'm not. Listen, I can't say I've ever eaten anything by Paula Deen. One of the things she said at the end of her deposition that probably got the most controversy, and I found it. It made me uneasy, and it's not something I would have said, but, well, let me just say it. What she said was that she saw a wedding that was catered by a wait staff full of dark skin. She said this to her husband, so it wasn't like she said this on air or publicly, which, by the way, it seems to me they're spousal privilege. They shouldn't even be asking about these things in a deposition. But she saw dark-skinned black waiters, and they were very professional with white coats and ties, and she thought it had a nice look. That concerned me. That made me uneasy, and yet, to me, that's still not enough to fire her. I'm afraid that's all the time we have, though. I want to thank you, Mike, for coming on the air, and I'll be back in studio next time here on The Inside Scoop. Thanks again for showing up.
Good night, Mark.